glad to have you all here today. So my name is Hillary Ritt. I am the Workforce and Adult Services Consultant with KDLA, and I'm delighted to have Kell Markham here today to present the session, Suicide Prevention Training, S.A.V.E. Today's session is going to go about an hour. It's a lot of good information that Kell has to share with us. But if you have any questions, please feel free to type those in the chat. And I'm going to put Kell's contact information in the chat here shortly as well. Today's webinar is being recorded, and there are also live captions available. And so if you have to leave or something comes up, this will be recorded. And then you can look for your certificate in a few days. And so if you have any questions, please feel free to type those in the chat. My colleague Kim and I will be monitoring it. And without further ado, I'm going to put up Kell's slides and let him start sharing. Thank you all so much.
All right, good afternoon, everybody. Thank you for having me. Appreciate being able to
Kell, we can't
get the
hear
word.
you. I don't know if
you still can't hear me. Kim says she can hear me. Okay. Looks like most people can. I'm not sure why Hillary can't. Maybe we can just communicate by chat. But anyway, good afternoon, everybody. My name is Kell Markham. I am the Community Engagement and Partnerships Coordinator at the Robley Rex VA Medical Center in Louisville, which is a big fancy acronym for the outward-facing mental health person, kind of involved in the community more than I am internally in the hospital, helping with training and just kind of finding out what's going on with suicide prevention, mental health, and serving our veterans within the community. We know that about more than 50% of the veterans who are eligible for care do not utilize a VA. So we want to make sure that we are doing our best to make sure they're getting the best evidence-based practices, treatment resources in the community as possible, as they would get if they came into one of our facilities for care. So one of the more valuable trainings, I feel like, for the community at large, just anyone kind of a gatekeeper, first responder, basic life-saving skills type training, is this S.A.V.E. training. And it's obviously geared towards the veteran and military population, as it was produced by the Department of Veterans Affairs, but it's really applicable for the most part to the entire population. So a lot of just the major pieces of it you can take away and utilize with just about anyone within the population. Any technical issues other than Hillary not being able to hear me? This is my first time using Blackboard since I was in college in like 1997 or 98 maybe. So I'm not sure what you can see. I hope it's the slides. If there's any issues or anything, hopefully the chat monitors can work those out. Like there's a slight delay in the slides materializing too. And I always, before we begin, I always want to do a little bit of housekeeping. I know that there's a likelihood that at least someone, if not multiple folks, on every training that I do have had some exposure to suicide, whether that be someone that they know, someone that they've worked with, just someone they've encountered has had suicidal ideation, maybe an attempt, or maybe even died by suicide. So, you know, it's a pretty intense topic just generally. I tend to try to share some things that have happened in my personal life and in my clinical work and training as well. So if it gets to be something that's a little bit too overwhelming for you or distressful, feel free to mute me, walk away from the training for a second, whatever you need to do. And if you have already someone who is in your kind of safety plan or you have a mental health go-to, feel free to check in with those folks during or after if needed. And as always, the National Suicide Prevention Lifeline is available for you 24 hours a day if you just need to call and connect with someone. So just a quick overview. We're going to learn a few facts about veteran suicide. I'm not going to go through all of the data points and belabor the point. I think it's just for the purpose of being grounded in kind of where we are with suicide in the general population and the veteran population. I think it's helpful to have a few data points as a kind of a baseline, but I'm not going to go over all of the intricate things that generally I do with clinicians that are working with veterans specifically. Some common myths and realities. One of the biggest takeaways that I want folks to have from this training is that it should be empowering for you. This should be seen as a tool in a toolkit that you can go out and you can interact with someone who you feel might be having a mental health crisis or a suicidal crisis and not feel as kind of unempowered or unable to interact with someone because you think, oh, well, I'm just not the subject matter expert on this. I'm not someone that's going to be able to really help this person. I might even make it worse. So that's one of the kind of common myths that we come across a lot is the inability to work with someone who's suicidal or help them if you're not a mental health professional or someone who has had experience before. We want you to be empowered just like you would if you had taken a CPR class and you saw someone who was having trouble breathing or their heart stopped or something like that. We'll go over the steps of S.A.V.E. It's a wonderful acronym like QPR and ASSIST, and some of you folks may have had those suicide prevention trainings. And if you've been in the military before, you're obviously very familiar with all the acronyms that we use within the military and the VA. And then a few resources at the end that you can follow up with. And I'll go over a few of those that might be more specific to you guys as a professional population. So by participating, we hope that you'll have a general understanding of the scope of veteran suicide in the United States, know how to identify a veteran or any person, should be applicable to most folks in society who may be at risk for suicide, and know what to do when you identify someone at risk. So I don't know if maybe you can put your comments in the chat if you'd like, but I'm always curious before I start one of these, what are your overwhelming questions about talking to folks that might be in a suicidal crisis, or just overall questions related to suicide prevention, postvention, anything like that? Does anybody have anything that you were thinking about coming into this training you wanted to have answered? I'll give you a second or two to, if anybody's typing. All right. We may not have any questions right off the bat. That's not atypical. And hopefully we'll answer anything that you might have had questions about. If not, hopefully we'll have a few minutes afterwards for you guys to ask questions as well. So just a few facts about veteran suicide. For some of you, you may remember, I guess it was probably around 2000, I don't know, maybe mid 2006 or 7, we started to get this information about 22 veterans a day were dying by suicide. I think the USA Today and the AP picked up on a study that was done, like it was one of the earlier studies of veteran suicide that the Department of Veterans Affairs had done, and that was the number that they came up with. That was not a super comprehensive study, and once they went back and actually took the value of that, decided, well, we need to make sure that we're getting data points from every VA, from every part of the United States, and from coroner's reports and all these things, and make sure it's super comprehensive before we start really focusing where our efforts are going to be with veteran suicide. And in 2008, I believe it was, they came out with the first kind of really comprehensive veteran suicide study and found that it was more around like 17 or 18 veterans per day on average were dying by suicide, which was still very high as in proportion to the national average. Some local folks, Dr. Julie Serial and I think Dr. Melinda Moore, if you guys may know them, they're from Kentucky, did a study that they actually found like that 135 individuals are impacted by every suicide. So maybe not as direct an impact as a family member or something like that, but we are impacted to some degree by a suicide. The severity depends on our proximity to that person too. So if you're a family member, maybe you were a teacher or they were a client, a friend of a friend, things like that. So it's something that affects all of us, and it's something that is a public health issue, and we all need to do our part in suicide prevention in our society. And I'm going to kind of gloss over these data point slides really quickly, but just kind of hit the high points of them. Another point I want to make sure that we talk about is this: it's a complex issue with no single cause. So whenever you say, well, so-and-so's, lost their job and that's why they killed themselves, that may be the precipitating factor. For lack of a better term, and we don't really actually like to use the verbiage in suicide prevention, but like a triggering event. Those are not the cause of that suicide. There's stuff that's happened environmentally. There's lots of risk factors that are present there. That could be everything from static risk factors like your age and the fact that you are a male veteran firearm owner, to things that are more dynamic, like loss of a relationship or loss of a job, or current or mental health episodes or medication changes, or all those things that factor into these things. So if we were able to know what that one single cause of suicide was, we'd be able to prevent a whole lot more than we are. But it's a really complex issue, and what we really want to do is do our best to kind of minimize those risk factors and maximize the protective factors, like access to mental health care and safe housing and access to all the care that they need and resources. I'm gonna have to start clicking early. So here's a couple of lists of just risk and protective factors that I don't think would really surprise anyone if you have ever done any sort of assessment or analysis of what risk and protective factors were for anything, whether it was any cause mortality or any kind of negative outcome you could possibly have. You could look at some risk and protective factors, and they're probably going to match up. I think we all know that less access to resources is going to be a risk factor. More access to mental health care or more access to your family or supports is going to be a protective factor. So none of these things should be really super surprising. Among risk factors for suicide prevention, obviously access to lethal means is a huge one. That's an entirely other discussion to have, and another training that I like to do with folks is how to talk to people about their access to lethal means, especially when it surrounds firearms, and we'll get a little bit more into that further on down the line when we talk about firearms and the lethal surrounding them. But access to lethal means is such a big thing. You think about, I think most of all of us live in Kentucky that are on this call, or we live in the area, and it's a firearm culture, especially when you start thinking about the military, first responders, police officers, those type of folks. Firearms are part of their culture, part of who they are. So they have a lot of access to those most lethal means, which are firearms. Just anecdotally, relationship issues have been a really big thing that I've seen in especially veterans and folks my age. So that group that's post 9/11 veterans under the age of 55, those relationship issues and having, maybe a separation and custody issues and all those type of things have really been the precipitating event for some suicides and some suicide attempts that we've had with veterans in our care over the past 5 or 6 years. Protective factors, having that sense of connectedness to your community. Problem solving skills is a big one. So we're teaching you guys how to interact with someone who's feeling suicidal so they can get into a position where they can learn how to self-soothe and how to put other coping skills into place where they might only have suicide as an option or a coping skill, or utilizing a substance like drugs, alcohol, whatever, and then leading to a kind of lubricated effect where they're able to self-harm because they're in that state of mind, in that irrational state of mind. So having those problem-solving skills, being taught those things or being exposed to those is a big protective factor. So we should have the 2023 suicide report coming out really soon. It's usually in here by August. So maybe I just haven't seen the release of it yet. But so this is a couple years old data, but it just kind of gives you an idea of what veteran suicide deaths have looked like since we started recording those in 2001 on a very comprehensive basis. It doesn't look like a big jump between around 6,000 to 6,200, but when you look at it on a smaller scale like this, the small number of veterans that are dying by suicide relative to the general population, there's a lot of variance here, but right around 2006 here, there's a little pointer that I could use on here, wasn't there? So right around 2006, you can see these were suicide prevention programs that the VA were stood up, and then we had a lot of success with the Veterans Crisis Line being implemented and everything, and it's kind of leveled off. Even during COVID, for those of you, most people are kind of interested in that. During 2020 and 2021, the numbers actually dropped again, which was kind of interesting. Preliminary theories that have come out of that are everyone was kind of in the same boat, and people were able to kind of find resources at the time. There was a lot more community coming around surrounding the people who are at most risk to make sure that they had the resources that they need. So the data coming from 2022 and 2023 will be interesting once we've started to kind of come out of that social safety net period. And this is just U.S. veterans versus non-U.S. veteran adults. So you can see the number per 100,000 being a bit elevated from the general population, this being the general population, non-veteran U.S. adults, and a little more variance, but also in the last few years, a more significant drop-off with those who are involved in VA healthcare. So it's about 4 times the adjusted rate decrease in that time frame. And this is male and female. I don't know. I'm not sure what your guys' kind of experience with or knowledge about suicide in general is, but the rule, or not the rule, but I guess the data has shown for years and years and years that females attempt more than males do, but males die by suicide more often than females do. And generally the thought behind that is because males use more lethal means, firearms being the most common, obviously. In this slide, if you take away nothing else from it, firearms are extremely lethal. And especially among the veteran population, you can see the non-veteran U.S. adult suicide rate, almost 50% was using a firearm. The male veteran rate, almost 70%. We have access to, we are comfortable with, and we have thought about using our firearm to end our life before. Even in the non-female or the non-veteran female population, you've got 31% there, which is still the greatest percentage of any other means for suicide. But amongst women veterans, it's at 50%. So pretty, well, I guess that was adults, but yeah, the men's numbers are still pretty close to 70%. So firearms, again, are what I focus on when I'm talking lethal means with my clients. Obviously, if it's someone who has had a suicide attempt with an overdose of medication or pills or suffocation or all those things, obviously that's what we're going to focus on. But in general, when I'm talking to veteran clients, we're talking about, do you have firearms in the home? Is that something that you would use to kill yourself potentially, and those type of things? Just very, very fatal. And lethal means safety is something that we are really new in as suicidologists, and having these conversations and kind of learning a good, good person-centered verbiage when we're having these conversations, because you can't go to someone in rural Kentucky and say, hey, we're concerned about your safety. You're saying that you might shoot yourself. You're going to have to give up all your guns. that's just kind of a non-starter conversation for most people, me included. I'm a veteran owner. That's not the way I want to be approached about the need to secure my firearms in a time where I am feeling particularly vulnerable. Having an effective way to talk about that, changing the verbiage up a little bit, and trying to use a little bit of motivational interviewing, and making it feel like a collaborative endeavor is really important. So just for example, just a little tweak in the language from saying, I'm really concerned about you. I think what we need to do, let's talk about how we can restrict access to your firearms. So instead, saying something to the effect of, I'm concerned about you, you don't want to die by suicide, but you're also saying this is how you would kill yourself. So how about we talk about how we can work together to increase the safety around that lethal means during the times when you're feeling vulnerable. So it doesn't have to be a zero-sum game where if you don't get exactly what you want as the safety professional person, and they completely get rid of the firearm, and maybe all they'll agree to is, oh, I'll just keep the safety on whenever I've got it by my bedside at night. That's something very little, but at least opens the door to the conversation that you're not going to push and say, that's not enough for me. You're going to have to do this. Otherwise, we're going to have a problem or whatever. It has to be collaborative, and it has to be something that the person will be agreeable to. And these are a couple of infographics based on studies that I think really drive the point home. So this meta-analysis that was done in 2001 shows that of all the responders that said whenever they had their suicide attempt that they survived, they made the decision, from the time that they made the decision to the time they were either able to de-escalate themselves or someone else intervened or something like that, there was a rescue, was 24% of those was about 5 minutes. So a quarter of all those attempters said window between when they made that decision they were going to attempt to kill themselves, not when they first started thinking about suicide or considered it, just the time when they were like, okay, this is it. I've tried everything I possibly can, and there's no other option for me. And when they were able to, when that situation was able to be de-escalated by themselves or someone else, was about 1/4%. Within an hour of that time was about almost 3/4%. So 3/4 of those folks within an hour, an hour is not a long time, but if you've taken pills, or if you're, trying to suffocate through carbon monoxide, or, fashion a noose or something like that, there's all these things that can happen in that time frame that can intervene and keep you alive when you're feeling agitated towards suicide. Excuse me. But with a firearm, even 5 minutes is an eternity. Once you have that firearm, that loaded firearm there, it's really difficult to intervene in any amount of time with someone who's going to attempt with a firearm. So you can see, in the second infographic there from the CDC, that about almost 90% of all firearm injuries were fatal suicide attempts. All other methods combined, it's every other type of suicide attempt, were only about 5% fatal. So I think I took the slide out that showed like how many suicides there are in the United States on average per year. Oh, thanks, Hillary, putting the Myrick information in there. I think there was 47,000, right around 47,000 in the last year, and it's been an average of kind of upper 40,000 suicides in the United States over the past 10 or 15 years. And suicide attempt, like 1 million and something suicide attempts. So a small percentage of those attempts actually go on to be fatal, thankfully. So about 90% of people who survive a suicide attempt do not go on to die by suicide. A lot of people that I've talked to, just again in my own practice, it was something where they felt agitated to do something, and they just got it in their head that suicide was that thing until they attempted, and then they survived, and they were like, why did I think that was an option? Why did I think that was going to solve the problem that's happening? They just were in that kind of like in their head state of mind where they just felt like that was the only thing that was going to happen, was going to stop her. They felt so agitated that something had changed that they felt that was the only way to change. And then once you get some retrospection from family and friends and, helping professionals and all that stuff, it's like, oh yeah, there are other things that I didn't try. So being able to survive even that suicide attempt and get some help and get some perspective on those things shows why we need to do everything that we can to help increase safety around firearms whenever folks are feeling really vulnerable. So a couple of myths versus realities. Like I said before, so the first one here is people who talk about suicide are just seeking attention. And I'll admit that there have been times in my life before I got into clinical practice and social work and things like that, you kind of get that idea of folks is like, well, they just keep talking about it, and they're not really going to do anything. But in reality, no matter how casually or jokingly said, threats should never be ignored. In the population that I serve, the veteran population, we have some pretty colorful language. So there's a lot more gallows humor. There's a lot more just kind of like, I'm not really sure what the way to describe it is, but one thing that we kind of all joked about when I was deployed overseas was that we made sure that we knew how many bullets we had in our M16 or our 9mm or whatever we had, because we didn't want to get in a situation where our life was in someone else's hands. We didn't want to be on YouTube or CNN, with enemy insurgents being able to take our life into their hands. We were gonna use our showstopper, we called it. Keep that one bullet that we would be able to use against ourselves if we needed to. So you internalize that. You kind of internalize that, and you also, that becomes acceptable kind of language, and then you start to, you start to dehumanize yourself to a degree. So whenever you can use things like that when you're talking to people, and a lot of folks in the general population would be like, oh, that's shocking. I don't want to hear that. But amongst the veteran population, you really have to kind of ferret out what is really someone that wants to die by suicide or is thinking about it, and what is someone just kind of blowing off steam, or that's the verbiage that they generally use to get their point across when they're distressed. And just an FYI, my daughter will be getting off the bus here in about 3 minutes. So if I have to mute for a second, it's because my dogs went crazy when she came in, and they'll all be barking. So I apologize if I have to take like a 30-second hiatus while they calm down. But maybe that won't happen. So another common myth: the only one who can help is a mental health counselor or therapist. Again, I look at this as a basic life-saving skill for mental health. So we do basic life-saving skills, CPR, rescue breathing, all that stuff. We get recertified every quarter on it, and I know that I can't prevent someone from dying from heart failure, but if they're having a heart attack or an episode or something like that, I know what to do to keep them alive until the next level of care gets there. That's really all you need to do with someone, is be there, listen to them, help them kind of understand that all the stuff that they're dealing with is not going to get fixed immediately, but you'll get them to that next level of care. You'll help them get to a place where they're safe to be able to get stabilized until they can kind of work out what's going on, to unravel all that stuff that's causing them to feel like suicide is their only option they're dealing with. Just being there, keeping open body language, listening more than you talk, all these things is really helpful. And being able to let folks know that you're comfortable, scared to talk about they're having a crisis, or even when they say the word suicide, will really go a lot with building rapport with that person and making them feel like they can trust you to talk to you, and allow you to help them get to that next level of care. So the step of S.A.V.E. So if you get, the same thing with basic life-saving skills, like I said, to remember what I need to do as far as chest compressions. They tell you, excuse me, they tell you do the BGs is staying alive. So if you think you're going too fast or too slow, it's that staying alive beat. Use these little memorization techniques. If somebody tells you they're feeling suicidal and you're not used to hearing that on a daily basis, you're going to be like, oh crap, what was the first thing I was supposed to do? So just being able to remember that SAVE acronym, maybe you can go back and be like, okay, what did the S stand for? Okay, looking for signs. The ask is how to ask the question, in a very confident manner, how to validate that person's experience, and then how to encourage and expedite help. So just remembering the SAVE part of it can really help you like remember what steps to go through to make sure that that person is feeling listened to. So some of the signs, I think if you look at these again, there's not anything that jumps out as like, well, I would never think that. I think we kind of have an idea of what someone we feel like might be thinking about suicide or might be depressed, might be thinking or feeling, or how they would present themselves. Hopelessness, that internal withdrawing from family and friends, drug and alcohol use. I think it's that when your personal hygiene suffers. I think we recognize those things and think, well, that person looks depressed to me because they're not, shaving or washing their hair, or they look like they haven't showered in a while or something like that. Obviously those would be things that we would look at and say, okay, well, something's going on with this person. Maybe I should ask some follow-up questions. I think the one maybe that we don't think as much of is this rage and anger. I think maybe, especially if somebody's raging or angry at us, we generally want to like get away from them. We don't want to have a conversation with them, and we don't want to help. We're just like, okay, you're in a place where I don't really want to be around you for fear of violence or confrontation or whatever it is. But a lot of times that can be potentially someone who's asking another way to ask for it. With veteran clients, I see that a lot because we weren't taught, we weren't issued feelings, is what what we talked about when I was in the military. You basically were taught to be angry, aggressive, and if something bad happened to you or something bad happened to someone you were serving with, you got revenge, and you turned all that stuff that was going on internally outward. And so that's how we kind of ask for help. We go and scream and yell and say nobody's helping us and we're in crisis, and we're going to do this or that because we're mad. But if you'll let folks burn that out a little bit and just let them know, I'm not afraid to help you. I need you to, I need you to kind of calm down a bit so you can tell me exactly what's going on with you, or just allow them to calm down a little bit if you have time to do that before you engage with them. That really builds rapport quickly, because they're like, all right, you're not going to be another person that just pushes me aside and doesn't really help me or anything. You'll actually listen to what's going on. So feel free to put your answers in the chat. If you've had any interactions with someone who you were concerned about, or who talked about being suicidal, or just even had thoughts about not wanting to be here, having those kind of ambivalent thoughts of life or death, any other signs that you identified, if you'd share that with us, that'd be great. Yeah, sad, crying. Anybody ever had an interaction with someone that actually had maybe gave something, say they were giving something away, or told you that they wanted you to keep something for them or something like that? Loss of interest in hobbies, that's a big one. Yeah, if you have a friend that's like, you've gone fishing with that friend on Saturday every day for the last 10 years, and they're like, yeah, I don't really feel like doing the fishing thing anymore. As a matter of fact, you can have all my poles and everything, my gear. I just don't really, not really interested in getting into it anymore. I definitely want to ask some follow-up questions about why that is. Kind of any sort of all or nothing thinking. So this is never going to get better, or this is always going to be the way it is, and it's distressing for that person, is a good opening to ask some questions, because if you're thinking things are never going to get better, they're always going to be bad, whatever that situation is, then obviously never and always makes you think, well, there's only one way to get away from that. So you want to make sure that you ask those follow-up questions and think, well, is this really something that's never going to get better? That black and white thinking that is just never good. We all do it, and it's really not healthy. And it's because we're probably in an irrational state of mind. So a few signs that require immediate attention. These are, it's not someone that's kind of like feeling you out. If I give them a little bit of, well, I don't think I'm going to take my meds anymore because they're not helping, and I don't care anyway. If they, if something happens to me, I don't care anyway. Those are a little more kind of ambiguous. These are when people are not saying the ambiguous things. They're letting you know. They're looking for ways to die. They're talking about suicide. They're being self-destructive. That's when you want to jump right into and look for signs. At this point, they're giving you the signs, and now it's time to kind of ask that question about, hey, it seems like you really are having some struggles. I totally understand that, but I also know that some folks who have had these struggles that you're having and are really stressed and distressed like you are, have thought about killing themselves. Is that something you thought about, or have you thought about suicide? Are you thinking about killing yourself? The question needs to be in some way, shape, or form that is very confident and very clear about what you're asking. And it seems a little bit harsh, but at the same time, it also exudes confidence that you are not scared to talk about suiciding and someone killing themselves. And it also opens them up to thinking, okay, well, I don't have to share that. They're already asking me, so they're already assuming. It's a validity technique called like a gentle assumption. When you, as the person who is concerned that something might be happening, just goes ahead and takes one step further than what they're willing to say, then a lot of times it will allow them to say, okay, oh, this is where I was getting to. So if you're going to say it, then yes, I have gotten to that point. Now, if we say it in some other ways that are not quite as confident and clear, we may not get the full truth about what their feelings are. So if you ask the question in a way that you're kind of fishing for no answer, a couple of things are going to happen. People are going to feel like, well, this person's not super confident, or they don't want to hear what I really am thinking about, or they're not like, nervous about it, and they can sense that. So if you ask in that way, so you say something like, you're having a whole bunch of struggles, and having a struggle with your relationship, and it sounds like you're getting ready to lose your job, and you're drinking a lot more, but you got a lot of stresses going on, but you're not thinking about killing yourself, though, are you? That just kind of like is a negative feedback to that person. They're already kind of feeling like, should I be feeling this way? Is something wrong with me? Am I crazy? As the person that they're asking to help gives them that feedback of, you shouldn't be thinking about killing yourself, right? That's kind of what they're hearing. So they're more likely to just, appease us as their friends, family member, subject matter expert, therapist, whatever, and say, yeah, no, and it's no, nothing. But if you ask in a way to say, you really struggle with a lot of stuff, has it gotten to the point where you thought about suicide yet? That gives them the opportunity to either say, yeah, actually it has, or if they haven't, they can also be like, no, that's crazy. What are you talking about? I haven't got that point. But either way, you're both clear on what you're asking and where you stand in the interaction. You want to ask in a way that flows naturally with the conversation. So, you're probably going to see some signs, and whatever those signs are, you ask about them. Hey, it seems like you're feeling more depressed. You've been crying a lot lately. Or what's going on? Ask those questions first, and then it's going to kind of be natural for you to be, well, some people have gotten to the point where they thought about killing themselves or thought about suicide. You don't want to see that first sign and immediately be like, hey, you look like you didn't shave today. Are you thinking about killing yourself? We don't want to like ambush anybody. You want to be able to kind of work up to it a bit and just have that conversation. There's no reason for it to be rushed, because as long as someone is there with you, whether it's face to face or on the phone, and you still have a connection with them, there's no need to rush their interaction at all. I think a lot of people who are uncomfortable with it, myself at times, does that when we just want to get to like, okay, you need this, you need help, I need to go ahead and do this. But to allow that person to come out of their shell a little bit and really feel comfortable in talking about it is really important. Okay, so did anybody have any thoughts about that? Does it seem like, does that make sense to folks? I know I've had people have challenged that a bit, and not saying that I'm 100% right or that the curriculum is 100% right, because I can see the interaction in certain situations where it wouldn't be. There's cultural considerations and things like that you have to take into account as well, that I've been told over the years. So I'll tell you just kind of a quick lesson that I learned early on as a clinician in suicide prevention when I first started doing risk screens with an inpatient psych ward. We had a veteran that had come in. He had cut himself really bad on the wrist to the point where he had to have surgery. He really had a strong intent to die. Woke up in the hospital and was shocked that he was alive, and med floor for a few days to get his surgery done and kind of get medically stabilized, and then was brought up to the inpatient psych unit. So I went to go interview him and do a risk screen and just kind of talk preliminarily about what his treatment was going to look like while he was on the inpatient unit. And so I asked him, I said, well, so you've gone through all this, and do you think that you would go out and hurt yourself again? And he said, no, I'm not going to hurt myself anymore. And so we continued on with the assessment and everything, and I documented all that stuff, and then went back to my office, and probably 2 hours later, the attending physician went in and interviewed him, and she was talking about medication changes and treatment plan for follow-up, outpatient, and all these things, and he was like, I don't need any of that stuff. I'm going to kill myself as soon as I leave here. And she was like, what are you talking about? I was reading your notes, and you said you weren't feeling that way anymore. I said, no. I said, that's my plan. I was trying to do it. It was like I'm in a situation that I can't get out of. Things aren't going to change whenever I leave here. So yeah, that's my plan. So she said, well, you need to go back in there and talk to him again. So I went back in, and I said, I don't really understand what happened. Like, did something change between the time I talked to you? And he said, no, I'm not going to hurt myself anymore. Like this hurts. It still hurts. It hurt to do it. The whole thing hurts. I should have done what I planned on doing in the first place, which was take an overdose of my blood pressure medication. I'm pretty sure I'd just go to sleep, and it would be just a drift off into death and darkness and no pain whatsoever. So me not being a confident young clinician and not asking the question that I wanted the answer to gave him an opening to be able to answer the question that I did ask. So I'm not sure still to this day if it was because he was being a bit gamey, needs met, or whether he really and truly didn't understand what I said, or whether he was just kind of a little bit fuzzy because of medication and stuff he was on, or what was going on. But that's my job as the helping person, to be clear about what I'm asking. And the next part we want to do is validate. We all have internal biases. I myself have to check myself all the time when it comes to people saying, well, this is the reason that I feel like I need to die, or this is the means that I tried to kill myself with, and I'm completely shocked that I'm alive. So I've had people tell me things like, I took 3 Tylenol PM and it was a suicide attempt, and I can't believe that I'm here, and I'd expected I was going to die. And I'm not a physician. I don't know much about pharmacology. I'm sure that 3 Tylenol PM is not fatal for most folks, and it's hard to believe that people might think it was. You can go ahead and grab it. That's all right. Take it tomorrow. Sorry about that. Where was I? Oh yeah. So we all have those internal biases, but we need to leave those at the doorstep whenever we're working with someone who who has coming to us for help. One of the stories that I always kind of like brings me back to this and lets me know how valuable it is and how important it is to validate the person's feelings, no matter what our internal feelings are about it. Is we had a guy who had gone to the hospital for a medication overdose, and he'd gone to an outside hospital, so we contacted him from our hospital to try to set up some outpatient care and follow up. And we talked to him, and he was good with all that and said, okay, you're safe in that hospital there. We'll make sure that we connect with you and get you transitioned to outpatient care. And then we got a consult that he had another suicide attempt. And so whenever I called him back and was talking to him, he said, yeah, I put my pants zipper in the outlet in the hospital room to try to electrocute myself. So the image that popped into my mind was this gentleman with his pants on, trying to get in a position on the floor to be able to stick the zipper into the outlet, which is, it's kind of funny. And you got to have a little bit of a sense of humor about things like that when you're working with people who are suicidal all the time, just to kind of keep yourself from being just, completely overwhelmed by it. But when I went to talk to the other clinicians and team, and I was like, this is the weirdest one I've heard in a while. But what had actually happened was he's in the hospital, so he's not wearing his pants. But they were in the room with him, and he had gotten down and tried to put the zipper into, which still not going to kill you, but he was reaching out for help. He didn't know a better way to do that. He didn't know, he didn't have a better set of skills to be able to say, I need help, and you're still not doing what I need. Even though I'm here in the hospital, you're still not helping me. So I'm going to ramp it up a little bit more and get to the point where you will listen to me. And sometimes that's, kind of a less fatal, a little bit more absurd experience. And sometimes it's not. Sometimes people do those type of things that they even intend to be an attention-getting thing, and you can die from those things. So we want to make sure that we are, separating who we are and our feelings about what our judgment of this person is, and just be helpful in the moment for them. And since we just have chat, I won't get into the discussion things too much. So some validating statements, like I touched on before, having that gentle assumption, normalizing it for someone. Yeah, anyone in your situation would feel that way. That's a lot to deal with. Like, anybody's brain would be looking for a way out and a way to cope with those things. You've been struggling a lot, so I can see where, you might get to a point where you feel like this was an option for you. So those are all good validating statements to make sure folks know that you're not there to pass judgment, and you can be understanding of the way they feel, even if you're not understanding of the situation. And the last part is to encourage treatment and expedite help. So once you've recognized those signs, you've asked the question, you've got the response that yes, I am, considering it, or I've been feeling suicidal, and you validate those feelings. Let them know that you're not afraid, you're not going to freak out, you're not going to go, run and call the police, when it's not necessary. Obviously, if it's something where a suicide attempt is started or someone is threatening to do something immediately, that's to get the authorities involved right now. Call 911. But if it's just someone who you're talking to and having a conversation and they're concerned and they're asking for you to help them, they want you to know that you're just going to be there for them and help them figure out what the next step is. And for a lot of folks, you guys in particular, that's probably going to be helping connect them with the 988 crisis line number, because there's not a lot of better options for 24-hour care, especially if it's someone it's a one-off, you're just one time talking to, you don't know their mental health team, or you don't know their spiritual team, or whoever might be that person that they would generally reach out to. Now, if you talk to them and they say, yeah, I really talked to my pastor or a deacon at church, or, I've got a mental health professional, or, this person helps me, my AA sponsor, whoever helps me whenever I'm feeling in crisis. They may already have a safety plan that has these folks identified, and that's who you want to help get them into contact with. But for a great majority of what you guys are likely to see, you just by chance happen onto someone in your workplace or over the phone or something like that, having that conversation with them and saying, hey, I am that first responder. I can help you, just kind of get to a point where you're feeling safe with me. But as far as like what the next step is, hey, can we call this 988 number and just talk to that responder and find out what we should do from here? Because that goes as far as where my expertise goes, and I don't want to leave you here without having some answers. So most people, they're asking for help, or if they've presented themselves in a way that's caused you to ask them what's going on, they'll be accepting of that, or they want help. So the best case scenario is that warm handoff with you and that person calling together, and then kind of handing them off to that responder to help them from there. Obviously, there's going to be times when either they give you some indication that something's wrong and then they leave your area or they hang up on you, whether that's volitionally or it was just you just feel like, well, something was up there, but I probably need to call on and talk to somebody and find out, like, is this something we need to follow up on? You can do what's called a third-party consult, where the person doesn't have to be involved at all. You just say, hey, I'm concerned. Here's the situation. Can you try to reach out to them? So that's a good resource for most things. There's very few times that I've, even as a professional doing this for 7 years, I can count on one hand how many times that there's been someone that said, that I've worried about. They were in what's the word I'm looking for? They were good. Suicide was imminent for them. They were imminently suicidal, and they wouldn't allow me to help them with follow-up, where I had to actually like get a mental inquest warrant started or call the police and have them go pick them up or something like that. It just hasn't happened that often. It's a really good thing to know, especially with folks younger than me, that they can also text and chat. So if you don't necessarily feel comfortable, if they don't feel necessarily comfortable talking to someone, they can go on the crisis line website and chat or text. And a lot of times that will turn over into a phone call once they feel comfortable. So those two options are out there also. So I don't know what this would look like in your particular areas where you work and live, but you always want to kind of develop a plan that is unique to what you're doing. So as far as if you need someone else to help you get resources, I'll come back to that. So like if this goes for someone that's on the phone or in your office or wherever you are, if you're at the grocery store or whatever. If it's something where you feel you have to leave that person to go get help, you want to try to get someone else involved. So just for example, in my office, we have chat and that kind of thing over Microsoft Teams, where if I'm on the phone with somebody and I know that the police need to be called out to go check on them, or there needs to be crisis response or an ambulance sent, I don't ever want to break contact with them. So I'll just have someone else in my office. I'll type and say, hey, here's what I know about the person. Please call and get this started. As for you guys, it's going to look differently. If you're in an office with somebody and they can kind of hear you talking, they may like know, oh, this is something I need to kind of like keep tabs on. And if you need to write them a little note or whatever and say, hey, I need you to, help me out with this or whatever. But if it can be a 2 or 3 person lift, it's really helpful. And I would recommend that you develop that strategy now, or at least have a conversation about what you would do if that happened, because in the moment it's really hard to kind of like figure out what to do. So it's always good, no matter where you work or what kind of office setting or living setting or whatever, you have a plan that if for whatever reason you end up having someone come into your office or call and is expressing feelings and thoughts of suicide, this is what you would do if you needed that other person to help with calling the crisis line and finding out what to do, or calling emergency services or something like that. And just remember that acronym. Like I said, I know that way, like I've had a couple of times when I've had to medically respond to someone and your first instinct is to panic. It is, I mean, I've I was in the military. I was deployed a couple of times to the combat area, and I've had all this experience with, intense situations. And still, every time I see like something that looks like it's going to be an emergency of some kind, your first instinct is to freeze. So, just remembering that SAVE acronym. Once the freeze part gets over, you can be like, okay, now I know what I'm supposed to do. I've got a little bit of experience with this, and it's simple. All I have to do is listen. All I have to do is validate. I'm not going to make anything worse. I just want to be there for that person in the moment. Um, and uh, and then I'll figure out how to help them get help once we get stable. So any initial thoughts, feelings, or questions? I think the only thing that I have left is a couple of resources that I wanted to go over, but it looks like we have about 5 minutes left, so I want to make sure your questions get answered.
I just happened to think of something, Kelly. So some of our library staff, our bookmobile librarians, are do outreach, and so could be potentially visiting a home with somebody who's an older adult, and potentially that this could come up. The person's lonely or something. So, and that kind of situation, they would be by themselves. And you've given the 988 number. Would that be the best? I mean, I know you can't tell every situation, but I can think of somebody who's alone and trying to help a person who may be, they're lonely and they're just struggling. Would this be a kind of situation where you could call 988, or pass it over to you.
Absolutely. Yeah, absolutely. It's really just a consultation line. The responders they're there for everything from I'm just lonely, need to talk, to I'm in a full-blown crisis, or I have started a suicide attempt and now I'm regretting it and need somebody to come help me. So if you're going out and you're that third party person and you're with them and you're like, let's see what somebody else recommends, someone who has a lot of expertise with this recommend that we do. If you're feeling suicidal and you're feeling lonely, things like that, and you can just call and say, hey, I'm here with Mr. or Mrs. So-and-so. This is what they're telling me. Can you kind of give us some idea of like some resources or what we might need to do based on what the presentation is?
Thank you.
And you guys still have questions, go ahead. I'm just going to, based on that question, take you to a quick other resource that might be helpful. So there's a bunch of mobile apps.
Links.
Oh, thank you. Yeah, so it looks like you're putting the links for a lot of the resources in it. And I think you said also those slides will be available for them. So a lot of the resources are a little bit, it's going to depend on how much interest you have in them. So I'm not going to go, into detail on them. But there's one in particular. This one's a really good one for what you were just saying, like these apps that you can have in your phone. So if you're going out to places where you want to be able to have resources on you quickly to get help. The PTSD coach is an excellent one just because it does have lots of PTSD type stuff on it, but it also has a built-in safety plan. So in the moment with someone, if you wanted to walk through that safety plan part of the app to like just have a conversation about, well, if you were feeling vulnerable, who would you call, and plug some phone numbers and stuff into that for them. So the crisis line, some communities have warm lines. So it's a non-emergent line. You don't call if you're in crisis. It's just like, I need to talk to somebody because I'm feeling lonely, or, I need to touch base or be grounded or something like that. But some of those are really helpful. There's one other that I think is super helpful for kind of the general, and that's what the safety plan looks like in PTSD coach. So it's kind of like, if you can walk through people that are concerned, what are your signs? Like when you think you're feeling vulnerable, what does that look like for you? How can you cope on your own when I'm not here? Can you read a book or watch a comedy on TV? Social distractions would be things like walking your dog in public, where people don't necessarily need to know that you're struggling, but you're just using them as a distraction without them knowing it. And then step 4 being the family and friends, or the people that do know your business. So you've already got a couple of people in your pocket, like I said, an AA sponsor or a battle buddy that you were deployed with, or your someone in clergy that you trust or something like that, that does know your business and know at times you get into crisis. And then when you call in and say, hey, I'm struggling, can you talk? They're not surprised to get that call. And then step 5, the professionals that you call would be the crisis line, your mental health clinicians, things like that. And then keeping myself safe would be just putting a couple of little lines in there that say, hey, if I'm feeling really bad, maybe I give separate the ammo from the firearm and give the ammo to my neighbor to hold for, a couple of days until I'm starting to feel better, whatever they're agreeable to at the time. And this is a really good resource, Coaching into Care, where if you're struggling to get a friend, a family member, anyone that you think needs some mental health care and needs an assessment or something like that to talk to someone, it just gives you kind of tips on how to talk to them and how to approach them in a way that's non-confrontational and doesn't seem like you're trying to force them into care, just to kind of give them some idea of how to dip that toe into mental health and helping if they need to. And then if you would like to, for whatever reason, maybe take the short version of this or share it with someone else, I think Hillary put in the chat this Psych Armor. You can go and take this kind of truncated version that's not nearly as interesting as the hour you had to spend with me, but it's a short way to at least get like a quick version of the S.A.V.E. So you hit the high points with folks if you wanted to share it with anyone and make sure that they at least have a little bit of an idea of how to interact with someone that they feel might be in crisis. And that is all of my slides. I saw something come up in the chat, but I missed it go by. See if I can open it here.
I'm going to drop, thank you so much, Kelly. I'm going to drop your email and contact information in the chat. And then Tricia had commented that she tells people about these resources, that they're free for anyone. They don't have to be a veteran if you're not able to see that. But so thank you. I'm going to actually stop sharing your slides, but go on and put up thank you to our sponsor, the Institute for Museum and Library Services, and they are the ones who allow this funding for this to happen. But I want to thank Kelly again. The recording for this will be available in about a week, and then you should look in your course to see the slides, and then your certificate in a few days as well. If you have any other questions, I've put my contact information in the chat as well. I can connect you with Kelly, and I'd be happy to. And then lastly, if you don't mind, please feel free to tell us what you thought about the webinar or any ideas you have, questions you may have had from it. That would be great. We appreciate your feedback. So I'm going to stop talking, but anybody else, if you have questions, feel free to chat them now, or you can reach out later. Thank you again, Kelly. I really appreciate it.
Yeah, you're welcome. I just want to let everyone know as well, like if you're interested in your office and your libraries, anything of having like a few little promotional items that have the 988 number on them and crisis resources. We have like stress balls and gun locks, the cable gun locks that will fit in just about any firearm. And a lot of those things that we will, I can ship to you free of charge. So just contact me via email and what you want and how much you want, and I can ship those things out to you if you need it.
Thank you, Kelly. Oh, wonderful, Tricia. Yeah, if you want, I guess you can reach out to Kelly and
just send me an email. All I need is how many items you would like, if you have any idea of what type you would like. I know you kind of don't know what we have, and then gun locks, obviously, and then an address to send them to, and we'll ship them in the mail.
Okay. Well,
thank you, guys. I really appreciate the opportunity.
Thank you all. And yes, please reach out if you have questions. And thank you again for all the resources and so forth you shared. Have a good day, everybody.